Hi there, this is your best friend in programming, Kodajit, and in this video I'm going to create a Blazor project from scratch, and I'm going to show you the structure, show you all the pieces in it. To be specific, I'm going to create a Blazor WebAssembly project because that's my favorite kind of Blazor projects, and we will study it. So let's get started. To code Blazor, you need Visual Studio 2022. That's the latest version. And you can download it from the internet by just searching for it. Visual Studio Community version is free and you don't need to pay for it, and it's fully capable. It can even compile the applications and you can sell them. And this is different from Visual Studio Code. So just remember, you want Visual Studio Community, search it, go to the website, and on this page, this is Microsoft's page for Visual Studio Community. Click on download Visual Studio. It will come to your PC, install it. It's about 2 GB in size. And once you've installed, we are ready to go. Now I already have it on my computer, so I'm not going to install it. I'm just going to go straight into Visual Studio. So here we are in Visual Studio. This is Visual Studio 2022. To create a new project, click on the button, create a new project, and you will get a window with a lot of project types. So you can see there are a huge number of project types. We can easily find Blazor by going to the search box and looking for Blazor. You've got Blazor WebAssembly app, you've got Blazor server app, Razor class library, and ASP.NET Core web app. Now the project that we're gonna create now is Blazor WebAssembly app. And even if you have a Blazor server app going on, even if you want to create a Blazor server app, don't worry about it. Go for the hosting model that you want. Both these apps work pretty much the same. So even if you have a Blazor server app, it's gonna work just like a WebAssembly app. You won't need to figure out a lot. It's gonna be pretty much the same. In this video, we're gonna go for a WebAssembly app, and I do have a video which describes the difference between the WebAssembly app and the server app in detail. It tells you exactly where you want to use each. In this particular video, let's go ahead with WebAssembly. So click next, and now you will be asked for the name. I've got a location where I put my test stuff. I'm going to just put it there, and I will stick to, let me call it my new app. Yep, my new app. And here you have an option that says place solution and project in the same directory. If you select it, what's going to happen is the SLN file and the CSproj file, the project file for the individual project, will be both in the same directory. And I kind of don't like this because each of my solutions will actually have multiple projects. You're going to have a separate project for more models. That's what I usually do, and I recommend it too. So I leave it unchecked, but it's more of a stylist approach. Go for what you want. If you're starting out now, I think placing it in the subfolders is a better strategy, so I'll leave it there. Click next, and then you get to select the framework that you want to work with. We have .NET Core 3.1 or .NET 6. If you're starting out in 2022, which of course we are, I would recommend that you stick with .NET 6 because that's the latest version. It's got the most amount of features, and this is also the long-term support version. When you have the long-term support version, it's going to be supported for 2 years, and that means it's going to be maintained. It's going to be there for a while, so you can go for .NET 6. It's a pretty good idea. Now, I don't really use the authentications, the account or Microsoft authentication, so I'm going to leave it as none. If you are going to use one of these authentication schemes, you can go ahead with that, but I'm creating an application for use for the general people. I like my projects to be web hosted and kind of like SaaS-like. So I will have to implement my own custom authentication based on cookies, and we will do that later actually in coming videos. So just stick around, you will find videos around that for that too. Next, we have configure for HTTPS. I highly recommend that you leave it checked because every website needs to be by default HTTPS secured. You need to install the SSL on the server anyways. So just make sure that you have HTTPS so that you can go for this from the first point, and everything you know that everything is working fine. Next, you have a option to stick ASP.NET Core hosted. Now, I told you earlier in my earlier video that you can actually have Blazor apps just from a CDN because Blazor does not require a backend. It's 100% front-end tech, and you can deliver a Blazor project from a CDN with nothing but an HTML file. Basically, you don't need to have any kind of IAS or anything running on the backend. But typically you will consume a backend service. It could be some APIs. So if you're using APIs exclusively, you don't need to have ASP.NET Core hosted. But if you're going to communicate with your own server, there's a database on the backend or something that you want to connect with, then leaving this could be a good idea, especially if you want to create a project that's connected to the front end directly. Now, the best thing about Blazor is you can use the same technology or the same libraries to communicate, to work with the front end that you have on the back end. So one library that's working for the front end, your models that are working for the front end, they will work for the back end too. So that's definitely a good idea to create a project that has ASP.NET Core hosted backend and make it a part of your Blazor project. Next is progressive web application, and this is just a manifest file. If you check it, it's going to create a manifest file for you which will have details of your web application like icons and all. And this is practical if you want to have your applications to be installable on mobile phones. So progressive web applications are web applications that can be installed on the phone, and they actually have access to some of the phone's resources too. So in this particular case, I don't really need this, so I'm leaving it unchecked. And then finally click on create and your Blazor project will go live. Alright, so here is our empty Blazor project. Let's look at the structure and see how it's laid out. So you got three projects over here. The My New App client. Remember, My New App was the name of my project. And then you've got My New App server. And finally, you've got My New App shared. So let's understand what each of these projects is about. My New App client is the client side of the project, the project that will actually load up in the browser. This has all your HTML code, your CSS files, your images, your whatever you put in the area that's accessible to your customers, to your viewers. That's gonna go into the My New App client. And the My New App server project is the part of the project that's on the back end, hosted on ASP.NET Core. Remember, we selected ASP.NET Core hosting model when we set up the project. So this is that part. And this is the part that your client will connect to using APIs. So this backend can actually be replaced by anything. You can have even a PHP or Node.js backend, and My New App client can connect to any of those. But in this instance, having the server project that is connected to, that's a part of the same solutions connected to the My New App client is a good idea. And I'll tell you why. But before that, let's also look at My New App Shared. My New App Shared is kind of a library project. It's a library project. It will have objects or classes that are exposed to My New App client and My New App server both. Let's take a look at something more. When you go to My New App client, click on dependencies and click on projects, you will see a list of the projects that this particular solution, this particular project depends on or it refers to. So for My New App client project, you have My New App Shared, only one project out of the solution that it refers to. And if you look at My New App server project, in the dependencies projects, you will see that it refers to both My New App client and My New App Shared. So any public classes that you create in My New App Shared, it will be available in both My New App client and My New App server. So that's a great place if you want to put any business logic here. That's a great place. If you want to put in something like database access or any processing that you want to make available to the client and the server both, that's the place to go. Now, the server project also has access to the client project's public objects. So any object, any classes that you create in the client project, they can be made available in the server project too. So you can actually code the server project very easily because you are sharing objects, you're sharing classes all through these three projects, which makes coding easier. You don't need to write code from scratch every time. Let's say you are coding an employee table, employee record, and you have something that is being displayed in My New App client. You can use the same object on the server and code it, returning JSON or whatever you want, which can easily be interpreted by the client and then used inside the software. So this is how the project is laid out. Next, we're going to go deeper in My New App client and look at each of the things inside. There's so many folders, pages, shared, and there are so many files, imports, app, program, and we will now understand each one of those. Alright, it's time now to look at the actual project itself, the actual Blazor project, and make sense of what you see there. The first thing we need to talk about is the entry point of the Blazor app, and that's in www root. That is actually the folder where all the static files go. You've got your CSS files there, you've got your fave icon there, and whatever images you want to put in, or whatever resources you want to share and make downloadable for the people who visit your site, you put it in www root. This is quite similar to what you did in .NET Core. So if you worked in .NET Core before, you know about the www root folder. It's the same in the Blazor app too. Now here is something interesting. You will also notice an index.html file. So what is an HTML file doing there? Well, that is the entry point of the Blazor app. Now you can see here, this is a regular HTML5. There is a car set declaration, there is a viewport declaration, there is even a title for your app, and it references some CSS files. This is Bootstrap, and by default when you create an empty project for Blazor, it's gonna set up Bootstrap. You can use any CSS framework you want, so it's not limited just to Bootstrap. You can replace the CSS tags here, and that's gonna be perfectly fine. And if you've noticed, the body tag is not very big. There is very little code in here, and if you're wondering whether you want to write or you need to write your HTML code in this, no you don't. This is just the code to load up the Blazor app, and you don't really need to modify this app in most cases. Here you will see that there is a reference to a framework, blazor.webassembly.js. That is the JavaScript file that is going to load up WebAssembly, connect Blazor to your web browser, and do all the work that is necessary to convert C# into browser executable code. So this file is just the entire framework. This is the file that will download Blazor, download your files. Everything will be done through the blazor.webassembly.js, and your Blazor app will be loaded inside of the div that has the ID app. So anything that you put inside this app is going to go away after the Blazor app is loaded. Right now we have loading, but once the Blazor app is loaded, the loading will go away, and instead of that the app will be there, and anything that you put outside is gonna be the framework around it, so that will still be retained. And there is another div with another ID called blazor.error.ui, and that is what you show if something fails. Maybe your server is not working, maybe the Blazor WebAssembly could not download your files, whatever happens. If that happens, there's a problem, then this text will be shown. So this is what we do with the index.html5, the UI. Now let us go to some other files. Next we have the program.cs. This is the second entry point. This is the entry point for the code, and let's take a look at it. Initially you have three declarations, three using statements. You're using ASP.NET Core, Components Web, WebAssembly, and your project my_new_app.client, so that all the classes that you've declared in here, created in here, can be available to program.cs. And now let's take a look at programs.cs. In most cases, again, you won't need to modify this particular file, but take a look at this line, builder.rootComponent.add app, and it refers to a CSS selector. The ID of the object is app. That's how you can refer to the div inside your index.html. This is how the Blazor WebAssembly is gonna pick it up and start rendering your project there. The next one, builder.rootComponent add head outlet and head after. Now that you will notice over here, the div ID app is inside the body element. So how do you actually modify the header? Suppose you want to add some CSS files, or you want to add some page title or other things to the header. This head outlet is actually the component that handles that, and now CSS, you're adding that component, and in this line you're adding that component to Blazor so that Blazor can detect and put in your headers. And this line injects the HTTP client object to the Blazor services, and you can then consume this HTTP client object in your code to make HTTP requests using the browser. So you're using the front end of the browser, you're not using the server, using the browser to any API source that you want. So if you want to connect with a backend API, you're going to use this later. So that's why this is something very important, using dependency injection. And finally, this line, it will build all of this. It will build your Blazor instance and then run it. The next file that we're going to look at is called app.razor, and this is also in the root folder of the project. This file is actually a component. It's a Blazor component. And before I talk about app.razor, I just want to explain to you the concept of Blazor component. You see, the entire Blazor project is divided into components. Every piece of visual element is actually a component. A component can be the entire navigational framework that contains your sidebar, your main view, whatever you're gonna put there, or it can be as small as just a small form or even a part of a form. So you know, when you put all of these components together like a jigsaw puzzle, your entire interface is made, and then you can interact with it. So the app.razor is actually your top level component that is loaded first of all, and you actually do the routing or the navigation work in app.razor. So anytime you're trying to reach a page, the first thing that's going to happen is app.razor will load up. Then it's going to check what is the page or what is the URL that you requested, and that URL it will go and find across all the components that you have selected. And I'm going to talk about Blazor routing after some time. It is a video that will have that should be dedicated to the topic, so I'm going to talk about that later. But for now, the app.razor file will find the component that matches the root that you have selected, and it will show that component on the screen. And this happens with this particular line: root view, root data, default layout, main layout. This is the main layout that's going to be loaded. Now, if you know about layout views, if you've come from an MVC world or you worked on .NET Core, you might know about layouts. Layouts are actually top level pages, and inside of layouts you can have navigational components, or you could be loading up different components that will make up your view. And your layout, your main layout, could be a part of multiple views. So inside the layout, inside the main layout, you will have multiple views, maybe your about page, your thank you page, your dashboard, whatever you're going to put there. So here you specify the main layout or which component is the main layout. So in the shared folder, you can actually find the main layout file over here. So this is the component that it refers to. Next, you have focus on navigate. Let's go back to the page. Next, you have focus on navigate, root data, and it has a place for a selector. Frankly speaking, I don't think this is needed, because what this line does is it will focus your page to the H1 element. In this case, the selector is H1. So it will take your page or scroll your page to the H1 element of your component that you load or the view that you load. Now, you can get rid of it, but if you don't, then you just want to make sure that there is an H1 element on your page that will be scrolled to the top. And if you have any data above it, above the fold, it might be hidden. So just take care, just test your application and you will be fine. Next, we have not found. So I was talking about routing. What happens if the route does not match? What happens if there is no page, or if the user enters a wrong URL and that just doesn't exist in your software? What's going to happen? This is the content that will be shown when this happens. So typically, if you're making a professional application, you might want to create a component for 404 errors or not found errors, and you want to show them the entire component. So this is very basic. It's just some text, but you might make it. You might want to make it more visual. You might want to put in your logo or some links to other locations in the software, whatever you want. Just put a component here, and that's going to work. So I hope app.razor is clear. It deals with routing, and this is a place where you can show information when your route does not match or when the URL does not match. Let's look at the next file. Next, we have imports.razor, and this again is very simple actually. This is the place where you will put in all the namespaces that you want to make available to all the folders that are below it in the hierarchy. So this time it's a top level folder. It's in the root directory of my project. So all the folders that are below it in hierarchy, they're gonna be able to refer to any of the classes or the objects in these namespaces. So it's just a simple utility function. You can have multiple imports functions. So let's say you got pages, and inside of that you got multiple folders. You're dividing your entire project into folders. You can have multiple using import statement, import file, sorry, and at each level the imports file will give the namespaces to the folders below it, to the files below it. I hope that's clear too. Next, you can see the shared folder, and the shared folder is kind of it works the same way as you would use a shared folder in a legacy .NET Core or MVC application. This is where you put in the code, or you put in the components, to be more precise, that you want to make available or that you want to use across a number of pages or views, if you want to call them that, or components, whatever you want to call them. I'll call them components, that's the best word. So the main layout component is the place where which will serve as a framework for the rest of your app. In this particular instance, you've got the navigation menu here, which is again a component. So they are referring to the component, it's the name, and the components are referred to by file names. You don't need to put in a folder, you don't need to assign a path to them. Every component will have a unique name, and the convention says that the name is gonna be in Pascal case. So you can see the first letter is capital, and then you are going to capitalize the first letter of every word that follows. So in this case, the component name is nav menu. You can see the nav menu component right over here. So this is going to be loaded inside of main layout thanks to this particular line. So whenever Blazor sees this component name, nav menu, it's just gonna go to the navmenu.razor file, load up all the data here and show it there. Now components are hierarchical, so nav menu can have multiple components too. So you can see that it has got some basic HTML data. You recognize the HTML, but there are some new tags that are not a part of HTML, like nav link. This is the component that's made available to you by ASP.NET Core or by Blazor, where you can put in your links referring to the other objects or the other pages, other sections in your program in your navigation menu. So the interesting thing about nav link is whatever link you put here, it's gonna match it. And if the link matches, if the URL of the current view, current page, it matches the nav link, that link is not going to be active and all the other links are going to be active. So this is just a shortcut way to make sure that the current link or the current section you are in, that menu item is not active. So it looks a bit different than all the other menu items on your navigation sidebar. So this is something that just a shortcut makes things simpler for you. Then you will see another component over here, survey prompt.razor, and this is a regular first class component of a Blazor project. It is specific to this particular project that they have created, that Microsoft has created as a sample, and it gives you a survey that you can fill in and give Microsoft some feedback. Now this is a component that they've used in multiple pages, so that's why they have put in the shared folder. It just goes to signify that the shared folder is fully under your control. You can either have the main layout and nav menu components, and you can also add your own custom components if you want to use them across multiple pages. And now finally, let's take a look at the components in the pages folder. First thing, you have got the index component. Notice that at the top of this component you have this text page and there is a little root. This is what tells Blazor that this is a component that can be accessed by a root. So when people go to the main to the root website, the root page of the site that you put up, the index.razor component will be loaded. Inside of that, we've got the page title. Page title is the component that is used to specify the title of the page in the head. Then you've got this text, hello world, and then you've got the survey prompt. This is the survey prompt, as we already know. Coming back to Razor, next you have the fetch data component. Again, to refer to this component, to go to this particular view, you gotta put in /fetch data in your URL and it's gonna load up. and then counter, which can be reached using the /counter path. So let's try it. Let's run it now and load it up. So it's loading now. You can see the loading text while your Blazor content is being downloaded from the website. And as soon as it's downloaded, you're gonna see your site. This is the site, and this is a full-fledged single page application. As you navigate through these components, through these views, no request is being sent to the backend server. It's all front end. This application will call the server only if you make an HTTP request. Let's say you want to save some data or you want to load some data, only then it will reach out to the server. Apart from that, everything else is on the front end itself. This is the magic of WebAssembly. We are using only C#. There is no JavaScript code that we've written in the custom code that we've written. It's only the WebAssembly code that's in JavaScript, and you can make a complete application using C# that is very, very powerful and runs inside the browser. We've got 3 different pages here, 3 different views. I will call them pages for convenience. This is home, the main root path. Then you remember counter. If you go to /counter, it's gonna go to the counter view. And if you go to fetch data, what do you think will happen? It'll go to the fetch data view. Here we are, the fetch data view. And this is how this entire app works. Let's go back to the page. And in future videos, we're gonna understand how exactly Blazor technology works, how single page applications work, how the components work, how you can connect them together and make a pretty nice complex application using cutting edge technology. So stay with me. I'm going to come to you with a series of such in-depth videos that are going to not just teach you that technology, but it's going to go in depth and explain to you how exactly everything works right to the micro level. This is Coderjeet, your best friend in programming. Don't forget to like my video and subscribe, and let's learn programming together.